Hey there, welcome. Derek Rydall here, founder of the Law of Emergence and author of the best-selling books Emergence and the Abundance Project. And I'm really glad to be with you all today. It's actually my first time back to Facebook Live after going through a very painful tragedy during this crazy COVID crisis time that we're in, and the loss of my 24-year-old son. It's been the most painful experience of my life, to say the least, but also one of the most profoundly heart-opening, soul-expanding experiences of my life. And I'm not going to talk a lot about that specifically today, but I'm going to talk more about that in the days to come, as I know so many people are struggling and suffering and in fear and pain and loss and confusion. And I've written a lot of poetry around it, and I'm going to share some of that. I'm going to actually read some of that. I'm going to read a poem today as well, just to kind of connect with you in different and deeper ways, ideally, to really start or continue to curate a new kind of conversation. And I want to talk a little bit about that today in regards to the stories that we're telling and the stories that we may be believing, both in terms of our own personal life, which is ultimately where it really matters, and also really there's the story that we're going to tell as a collective. And it's important to understand that story, like everything else in life, evolves, and that we're constantly in an evolutionary process where the survival of the fittest, meaning that which can produce more life or that which can create ultimately more survival, is what survives. Right? If it turns out it's better to have two wings than one, that creature evolves into two wings and as a bird. If it turns out this creature can survive better on land, it evolved out of the ocean. And on, there's an evolutionary process. And a lot of it took place automatically, but we're at a point now where our evolution as a species is not going to happen automatically. It happens through conscious choice, through co-laboring or collaboration with life, with each other, with that emerging impulse within ourselves. There's a collaboration with the evolutionary impulse. And an evolution, in this sense, is the selective, natural selection and mutation, is that there's a lot of opportunities that emerge at an evolutionary inflection point. There's a lot of potential choices. And many of the choices will be tried out. And the one that seems to, again, have the greatest opportunity to survive or somehow serves the most people, I'm talking about human beings now, or serves just really survival potentially of a species, that one is what wins the day. The problem is that doesn't always mean it's the best. It just means that we believed it would help us survive. And what happens is at various critical times in history, there's a lot of new stories and old stories, old memes that begin to come together and compete with each other, right? And again, I'll talk about how this applies to your own life in a moment. But it's often in a very disruptive time such as this where this occurs. Old memes come back, new ones are created, some of them begin to mutate and mate together to create yet new stories. And it's all an evolutionary process where the new story, the new mythos that we're going to begin to live from and live into emerges. And again, it doesn't just happen. If you just sit back and let it all happen, you may or may not get the story you like while the rest of society begins to live into it, begins to act it out. It becomes the new program. One of the reasons that the Christian teachings or the Judeo-Christian teaching survived was as a story, the built-in program and principles, enough of it helped society evolve, helped consciousness evolve, and therefore it survived, right? And we're right now again in a point where we have to decide what story is going to survive. And there's a lot of things floating around. I won't go completely down the rabbit hole, but there's a lot of conspiracy theories And I don't mean that in the sense of the way the FBI or the CIA tagged conspiracy theories as a way to shut whistleblowers up. There are real nefarious things going on behind the scenes in government, politics, business, all of that. But there's also a lot of propaganda. And again, this always occurs. If you know your history, you'll see that this always occurs, where all of this stuff gets brought up and then certain actors will take advantage of it for their own purposes, such as it happened after World War I in pre-Nazi and then ultimately Nazi Germany, and gave so much power to the people by speaking a story of giving back the people their power and giving back the homeland. And as a result, a certain nefarious character rose to power, and we know the rest of the story. And it happened in other countries throughout history. It's happened always throughout history. And right now, even during the Christian times, there were a lot of competing stories, and eventually one of them won out. And I'm not saying that there's not truth, and there's not facts, and there's not valid information in a lot of these competing stories right now. What I'm saying is that we need to now more than ever be vigilant with what we believe, with what stories we consume, and what stories we actually digest, and what stories we actually buy into. Because there are several of these stories that are emerging now that some people will try to use to gain more power in government, more power. I'm talking about all around the world. It's already happening. More power in business, take more power away from people. Some of the stories are about giving more power to the frontline workers of the world. Some of the stories are about how the system's broken. Some of the stories about how the planet is broken, or some of the stories are about how the planet's punishing us. There's a lot of stories. And I just really, really feel obligated to inform you and invite you to be more vigilant than maybe you ever have been about where you get your information, where you get your resources, and doing the real due diligence. Because now more than ever, with media and social media and technology, there is so much of a capacity to fool us, more than ever. And with the right charismatic leader or the right integration of visuals and audios and videos, you can fake so much of that. The ability to fake it, to create it. We saw this during the United States elections, where a lot of Russian bots and maybe even some Chinese bots were involved creating fake stories, all to divide and conquer. This has been going on for a long time, but the capacity to do this is stronger now than ever. And as inspired individuals, as truth students and truth seekers, as thought leaders and influencers, it behooves you to really, really check yourself. Are you buying into a story because it's triggering something? Because it's triggering a pain, a fear, a wound, an anger? And if so, that's really important information that allows you to look at the stories you've been telling, that allows you to clean up the stories you've been living, that allows you to begin to pass your stories through a vetting process to discover, is this based on fear or is this based on love? Is this a story based on separation and competition, or is it a story based on collaboration? Is this a story that's actually based on universal truths, or is this a story based on limited or relative perceptions and paradigms and beliefs? And without judgment, you want to begin to become more and more self-reflective, contemplative, and masterful at noticing where you're getting caught up in the stories of the world and using them as a mirror to see where you're getting caught up with the stories within yourself and to see what are the stories that I'm believing. Because it's important to know you're not experiencing life as it is. You're experiencing life as you are. You're experiencing life through the filters of your own perceptions, which have become beliefs, which then become storylines, which then become part of the simulation of our mind, which then we cast ourselves and others in, and then we live them, and we think we're just living life. But we're really living a story, and often we're puppets in somebody else's story. And so you want to be very vigilant. You want to do your research. You want to, but more importantly, you want to notice, how do these stories trigger you? What do they make you feel? What do they make you think? What do they make you believe? If they make you begin to create enemies, that's not an ultimately helpful story, because the enemy is ultimately within you. I'm not saying put your head in the sand. I'm not saying put your head in the clouds, but you want to definitely not put your head up your you know what. Okay? You want to be as wise as a serpent and as gentle as a dove. You want to be the divine judge, discerning. And you want to use the stories that the world are showing you to wake up to the story that you've been living. And then you want to decide, is that the story I want to keep telling? Is that the story I want to be the next chapter of my life? And you can also begin to ask bigger questions. What is the real story that's emerging or trying to emerge in my life? What's the story that's trying to emerge on the planet? Because there is a new story trying to emerge. And the clearer we get on our story, and the cleaner we get on our story, in terms of taking responsibility, and the less we engage and react in all of this debate and conflict and competition for story online right now, the more we become the light of the world, the more we become the new storytellers, the more we become the thought leaders and the influencers of people's thinking. Understand, the old saying, the pen is mightier than the sword. The pen is mightier than the sword, but an inspired or an empowered or a passionate thought is more powerful than the pen. If you can influence the thoughts of the people, you win, period. And that doesn't mean you necessarily have a good story if you're just good at influencing. We see this with the US government and politics right now. And again, we see this happening online with a package of stories and documentaries that have been coming out that have half-truths, partial truths, some facts, some old stories, all wrapped together to serve a mostly invisible agenda to most of the people that are following it. And so because they're very good at marketing, it's the people behind it are very good at propaganda. And so you want to notice that. Where are you getting caught up in these stories? What is the story that's running you? And what is the story you want to be living into? What is the story that is trying to emerge in you? The true story, the next level of your life story. What is the greater, grander story trying to emerge on the planet? What is the story you're going to take a stand for and maybe even be an influencer or a thought leader or a storyteller in? Because mark my words, we will look back on this time and see that a new story emerged. And if you didn't take your rightful place in doing this work, you won't have anybody to blame but yourself. And I'm including all of us in this. But if we're willing to have the courage to not take anything at face value, to challenge it all within ourselves, not necessarily to fight about it online, but to challenge it within ourselves and to use it to clean our own side of the street up, our judgments, our fears. The fear is a signal that you're believing a lie that's pointing to a truth that you are being called to apprentice under. And then you can use that truth to tell your new story. The anger is telling you that you are stepping over your own needs and your own true voice, and that there's a deeper need and a deeper truth that's trying to emerge. That can become part of your news story. The judgment of anything that's pushing you and triggering you is showing you that there's a shadow, some part of you that you have rejected, repressed, judged, shamed, blamed, attacked, or felt attacked by, or felt it was attacked. And now you're seeing it on the screen, you're projecting on the screen of your experience. You clean that up, you reclaim a part of your wholeness, you reclaim a part of the heart of God, that becomes part of your new story. You get it? So I really want to invite you and even share here, what's the news story you want to tell? What's the news story you feel is emerging for you? What's the news story you believe is emerging on the planet? And I want to say one final thing. You're never going to find the truth out there. So many of these people online, where they're fighting over what's true, this conspiracy, that thing, you're never going to find the truth out there. There is no truth out there. There may be some factual stories. Again, most of them are a mixture of fact and fable and just fiction. But the truth is something you can only find within yourself. Okay? There are no true stories out there. The truth can only be found within. So if you're looking for the truth out there, you'll be looking forever. And you may find some things that are factual or interesting, but you will then be lost in the story. We want to wake up from the story. We want to step out of the storyline and the simulation of our mind that's made up of past memory and future fantasy and present imagination and discover who and what am I? Where am I? What am I? Why am I? Separate and free from all the stories of right and wrong, should and shouldn't, good and bad. Because there's a truth about you and about us and about life that has no right, wrong, good, bad, should, shouldn't. It simply is. The love, the peace, the joy, the beauty, the abundance, the wisdom, the genius, the freedom and fulfillment, the harmony and order that has no opposite. That is the true story that's emerging as you and as us. So share below, what is the story emerging for you? What do you think the story is emerging on the planet? And what is the story you want to begin telling and begin living so that we can support each other in beginning to discover that all of us together are beginning to tap into and tell a singular new story. And where two or three are gathered together in agreement, that becomes a new law unto our lives. And that begins to lift the world. So I want to finish with just reading this poem called Why We Come Together. And I apologize if I have to look off camera just to read it, but it's called Why We Come Together. What does it mean to communicate? To commune, not to debate, to connect, to relate, and experience the unexpected. We don't come together to become separate. We come to each other to become more connected. We have nothing to prove but to prove there is nothing that can move us from loving when we seek understanding. Not to show we are right, not to win any fight, but to share what we feel and heal in our expanding. It takes patience just to listen when it feels like they are missing the thing you're really saying that you need for them to know. It takes courage to let them in, to let them see you, not to win, but to know you deep within so you can meet inside your soul. But if your heart can be defenseless, knowing nothing is against us, all the places you've been restless can come out and feel the sun. Then you'll finally see the light that's been hiding in plain sight. That me and you and I are not two. We are one. We are one. We are one. I love and appreciate you. Please share this. Comment below. Share your story. Share this with your loved ones. And together we really can create a world that works for the highest good of all. And stay tuned for more. I'll be coming to you live and sharing a lot in the days to come. I really love and appreciate you. Take care.